No mai hoki mai e te iwi. It's time to get into our first shift towards strength-based wellbeing. We're going to spend time exploring what we mean by strength-based wellbeing and what impact it can have on the ground. To get this kōrero started, we will hear from Wilkie, Jules Lynch, Aimee Hadrup, and Dee Ann Wolferstan, who will give us an overview of what strength-based wellbeing looks like in South Auckland. For this session, we're also joined by Debbie Power, Chief Executive of the Ministry of Social Development, and Krista Wattignar, Deputy Police Commissioner, who will be listening in and providing reflections at the end. Dee Ann and team, over to you.
Tēnā koe, Nikki. Tēnā rā koutou katoa. I te whananga e te minata marama, tēnā koe. Mihi mai te Aorerekura Hui, Puata, Brad, for your insights and wisdoms into Te Aorerekura. May I acknowledge the many online champions of change, tangata whenua, kuia ko mātua tohunga, agencies, academics, hapori, providers, and the little old me. So kia ora. Emma, too much Emma, the tumu whakarai, kia ora. Ko Dee Ann Wolferstan toku winga, he moko pona au o te aupauri, nā te kahu nā puhi roho mai wahine, rākau pākau nā te parau. I te minata, Te Aorerekura, te pēki mahi marama, pēki mahi. What an awesome day it is today to launch out a wānanga, to celebrate, to learn, to listen, to understand more of what the next 2 years ahead of us looks like, what the next 20 years ahead of us looks like. Kingi Tāwhio provided a whakatauki. Ki te kotahi, te kākano. Ka whati, ki te kāpua. E kore, e whate. When reeds stand alone, they can be broken. When we stand together, we are unbreakable. Te Aorerekura speaks to a shift towards strength-based well-being. The wisdoms of Kingi Tāwhio from way back when share the foundations for which we should humble ourselves. And I don't say that, and te minata, agencies humble themselves to listen more, to do more for our whānau. In Tamaki Makaurau, or more specifically, Counties Manukau, we've been bringing change into the relationships between whānau, hapori, and agencies. And I know this happens across Aotearoa, so we're not unique in this space, nor are we the masters of this space. We are ever evolving and learning. We are yet to achieve the gold star model moving forward, but we have been listening and learning from each other. To bring together this shift and change, the first and foremost step we must do is to honour the relationship that we have with mana whenua. In that honouring, a few years ago, they gifted us 12 values, and we are grateful for Pukaki ki te ake tai for their ongoing tautoko and support for the shifts and change that happen in Counties Manukau. Those values bring to us the foundations of which we must operate under. And one of those values speaks loudly to the whakaaro that we are going to talk about today, ukaipo. This should be a place of nurturing and well-being, was the whakaaro attached to that. Step 2 in our bringing change to this, to well-being, was to enable our whānau a space of healing. Now this is a huge challenge for us all. Enabling the voice through the advocates of change, and there are many of you that are in the Zoom or in the wānanga today who have been loud about what is and what isn't happening in our hapori, in your communities. And one of those things is bringing voice to the equality of the relationship. That is the key importance, the equality of the relationship. removing the master servant, and I think Puata, you said transactional relationship, and positioning towards a community-led approach, and working towards achieving tokoturu. Some of those insights that we have learned from in our little world of Counties Manukau, we've had ka whiti te rā, a pakakura marae approach. Now, I am sure we call him Te Mea o Te Papakura, Tony Kake, would welcome you all to come and see what they do in Papakura, an amazing mahi they do. Nā Pautuarongo are really early insights of a joined up approach with Pacifica, Māori and non-Māori to combat family violence and have the voice of tamariki present in that kōrero. The Aroha mai, I don't know what happened there, whether it was my side or your side. I think, I was where as a papa, and a papa had a whawhai with his kōrero he was staying with. The next morning, this MD cap came together, they had him in emergency housing. But it's not about that solution. What was important was they paid for that emergency that night. And a week later, when he got paid from his job, he came back to give back the money. And he was so appreciative of the MDCAT's intervention together that he wanted to show his gratitude. Te Taonga Manawa, the Pacifica Collective, or others. But the importance of all of these is to learn from the ideologies of change and what we've been asking for from government ministries to bring their taringa and their wallet to support our hapori of change. One of our Ngāti Waia kuia said a couple of days ago, the humility that has made me great, and her translation to that is, come humbly so we can do, as our minister has said, get things right. And at this point, I'm going to tikina tō rākau to Aimee, who will tell you about what we've learned and where we're going to.
Kia ora, Dee Ann. Aimee is currently not online.
Oh, kia ora. Well, that's kei te pai te rā. We can actually send it over to Jules.
Kia ora koutou. Tēnā koutou katoa, kua hui hui mai nei I tēnei rā. E mihi ana ki ngā iwi o te motu. E ngā rangatira, tēnā koutou katoa. Ko waio, ko Ngāti Tūwhare toa, Waikato Tainui me Ngāti Maniupo tōna iwi, ko Jules Lynch toku ingoa. I te whānau, I'm the Regional Public Services Commissioner for Tamaki Makaurau. I started in the role in November last year, and I'm also the Regional Commissioner for Auckland South with the Ministry of Social Development. I joined MSD in August last year, and prior to that have worked in the public service in New Zealand Police, excuse me, in Counties Manukau for many years, including a recent 3-year secondment with the Ministry of Justice. So my brief today is to give a quick overview of the Regional Public Service Commissioner role and the regional leadership groups in 4 minutes. So they are part of the Caring for Community response, focused on being community-led, regionally enabled and centrally supported. The framework stems from the Public Service Act, and the Regional System Leadership Framework was established in 2019 with our CE, Debbie Power, tēnā koe Debbie, as our system lead, and Peter Hughes, Public Service Commissioner, Head of Service. Why? Because we know that we need to work collaboratively across and around communities' needs and strengths. Community is a community-led response. So there are 11 regional public service commissioners across the country with a clear mandate from Cabinet to convene, resolve and escalate. We bring together regional leaders, work collaboratively across all of government, iwi Māori, community and local government on a number of national level work streams and regional and local priorities. One of those key priorities for the regional leadership groups is to enable Te Aorerekura implementation in regions. So how? So while the Auckland Regional Leadership Group continues to support the Caring for Community response, a key purpose of the group is to provide strategic oversight and also to enable an authorising environment on specific local or regional issues and priorities. We work closely with agencies and with the South Auckland Social Wellbeing Board, the implementation team, the Southern Initiative, Iwi Māori, community partners, and our providers, who are the ones that are designing, leading, and delivering solutions locally to affect change. They are helping us to learn through the evidence and insights gained about what is working for whānau and communities. So our role as a regional leadership group is to provide that authorising environment, to listen, to enable the community-led response, and to look for opportunities also to further strengthen the response and share the best practice about what is working locally, both regionally and nationally. I just want to highlight during COVID, we operated in a high trust environment, and we have an opportunity to take some of our learnings forward into business as usual. I've been privileged to be part of regular forums with our partners and providers who are on the front line that provide essential services to whānau. And a key part of my MSD role and my two colleagues who are regional commissioners in Tāmaki is to provide information about what products and services are available for whānau, to actively listen to concerns, and also think about how we can work differently by enabling that community-led approach. It's also an opportunity to gain valuable community intelligence and information, and also to connect our people from MSD, our products and our services, to ensure that whānau that need our support get their full and correct entitlement, including support into employment. And it's also an opportunity to feedback and who continue to do the lifting, the heavy lifting to support whānau across the motu. We will continue to listen and work collaboratively and provide an authorising environment for community-led responses. Kia ora, I'm going to pass the rākau over to Ann Wilkie. Kia ora, Ann.
Kia ora tātou. Ko Ann Wilkie toka ingoa. I'm the Program Director of the South Auckland Social Wellbeing Board. It's a role I've come into on secondment from the Counties Manukau Police, where I was the Director of Whangai Ngā Pahari Kēkea. Building off the kōrero of the previous speakers, which would have included Aimee, hopefully she'll be able to join us at the end of my particular part. I'm going to reflect on the journey that we've taken to get to a place where we're beginning to understand the conditions that need to be in place to support whānau and community leadership, regional enablement and national support. Our journey began in 2016 with the implementation of the Counties Manukau Whangai Ngā Pahari Kēkea initiative, which, although it was police leading it, it was acknowledged that it required cross-agency support, strong relationships with iwi and other parts of the sector if it was going to be successful. At the same time, the concept of place-based initiatives was being introduced in Tairāwhiti, Northland and South Auckland. The South Auckland Place-Based Initiative was initially known as a Social Investment Board, but later became the South Auckland Social Wellbeing Board. It always had the vision that all children in South Auckland are healthy, learning, nurtured, connected to their communities and culture, and building a positive foundation for the future. The board is comprised of 13 government agencies with an independent chair. The decision to make the board agency focused was a deliberate one at the start, and that was to ensure that the agencies were able to tidy up their backyards and work well together before trying to come alongside community to work together. We take a test and learn approach towards system change, and over time we've seen our board move from merely networking to becoming far more collaborative with a shared vision and sharing of resources. Once the board was established, they agreed to provide oversight and governance of the Whangai approach, and by utilising some of the learnings that we got, we were able to start bringing our agencies further on board to understand that family violence is actually everybody's business. It certainly doesn't sit with police alone. Family violence is a sensitive indicator of a whole lot of underlying complexity and stress that could be experienced by whānau. And sometimes the violence is just the symptom, not the cause. This meant that the likes of MSD, Kāinga Ora, Health, Mental Health, Ministry of Education and others play a really important part to address what matters most for whānau in that time of crisis. And these tended to be the same whānau that all of the agencies were trying to work with independently or individually, but were being seen through a family violence lens. For us, this led to a multidisciplinary initiative, which Dee Ann was alluding to before she was frozen on the screen. But we tested it during 2 Christmas periods, once in 2018 and again in 2019, which brought together the relevant agencies along with representation from across the sector, including Kaupapa Māori, Pacifica, Women's Refuge, the disability sector, Rainbow Community, Community Mental Health, Child Focused Services and others, to share information and work collaboratively to resolve the things that mattered most to whānau in a timely and coordinated time, which was particularly stressful at Christmas. This approach was then adopted into core business and supported by our board at the beginning of 2020. Once this level of collaboration had been established, it was easy to implement similar ways of working through different lenses, looking at whānau complexity and wellbeing. For example, we provided support for vulnerable whānau during COVID. And more recently, we've been supporting tamariki and their whānau who have been involved with stealing cars and committing ram raids and other serious offending. One of the common threads that we're seeing for those tamariki is that they've all been exposed to family harm. Some of the key things to consider for the journey that we've undertaken is the importance of things like trust. And it's been mentioned numerous times already, and I'm sure it will over the next 2 days. Trust is vital. It's important. It's got to be across government agencies and NGOs, agencies in the community, NGO and NGO. This trust enables us to think and respond differently. We begin to share risk and resources, and we put whānau at the centre of what needs to be done. But trust takes time to establish, but it is absolutely vital. Likewise, leadership, really active leadership is required at all layers. And again, if Aimee gets the opportunity to speak, she'll talk through the layers that we see the integrated community response being seen as. The collaboration as well has been spoken a lot about, and it's an essential element if we ever want to make a significant difference in the way we respond to family violence. How we also look at strengthening and healing approaches and understand wellbeing for our community, especially in the early years, and in turn the elimination of family violence and sexual violence. Kia ora, and hopefully I'm able to hand it on to Aimee.
Tēnā tātou, aroha mai, good old technical challenges. Sudden reimagination of our program. Tēnā tātou, ko Aimee Hadrup tōku ingoa. He Pākehā hau no tāna ki mai kōrero. I'm part of the team at the Southern Initiative and work really closely as part of the South Auckland Social Wellbeing Board as Auckland Council's board member on there. I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about how we're going about this shift towards strengths-based wellbeing in South Auckland and how we're really jumping on the opportunity with the integrated community response mahi to explore and really get serious about how do we enable a wellbeing system in place and those platforms that the Minister talked about for creating the change that is laid out in Te Aorerekura. I'm just going to share my screen, hopefully, so bear with me for a, oops, that's the wrong tab, good one, Aimee. Now, I think I've got it. 1 second, team. Here we go. Okay, great. Slideshow. There we go. Excellent. So there are really 3 things that we're trying to explore through the ICR work and things that we're holding really central as we start to grapple with what this can look like. So the first thing is, how can we activate whānau-led approaches, and how do we really think differently about how we share power and control? This is really fundamental, and it goes beyond just thinking about whānau voice or being whānau-centred, but actually what are the mechanisms that we can start to create that really put whānau in the driver's seat in terms of what this could look like in community. We're also really trying to figure out what it looks like to reconfigure around what matters, what we're learning about what matters most to whānau. So how we do the activation of te toku toru in community. So yes, we need the excellent integrated responses, and we need to be thinking about how we're reconfiguring investment and our efforts towards strengthening and healing. The third thing is really, how are we enabling systems change at every level? So we have to be as intentional about that as we are about doing really amazing work on the ground with whānau. And I guess there's a really strong intention at the moment across the public service to shift towards more whānau-centred, locally led, regionally enabled, centrally supported ways of working. And the big opportunity for us, I think, at the moment is to go, what does that actually look like, and how do we really hold that and lean into that as well as the work on the ground? Because as we all know, whānau communities have the answers. So we need to reverse engineer our system settings to enable more of that to be possible, because our status quo approaches are making that too hard and constraining that. And yeah, this is, I think, something that should be front and center for us with ICR. So in terms of a strengths-based approach to wellbeing, for us, this starts with the early years. So both TSI and the South Auckland Social Wellbeing Board have a really strong focus on how can we better support and lean into those critical years where the brain is being laid down and we're setting the foundation for a child's entire life. And this diagram from the Child and Youth Wellbeing Strategy actually just reminds us that there are many influences on tamariki wellbeing, and there's really untapped potential in terms of how we can all play a role in really supporting particularly those early years, but obviously there are lots of points across the life course that are really important. So part of what we've been doing is exploring, what does it look like to really activate our different roles, and what might we do together to kind of pull together a coherent approach to this. I'm just going to touch really briefly on some of the insights that have emerged from our work innovating together with whānau and the Social Wellbeing Board in South Auckland. And it really just reminds us that when we start from the perspective of whānau and their lived realities, that we get some really important start points for thinking differently about what's most important in terms of wellbeing. And I'm just going to touch on a couple of these, but this piece around supporting aspirations, and certainly in the early years, we know the birth of a baby is a time of unparalleled motivation for changing your life and creating an amazing future for your tamariki. And it's something that we think we could do more to get in behind those aspirations. What does that look like from a community and whānau-led perspective? How do we not just do the kind of what do people need, but also how can we support the aspirations that they have for their life and for the life of their tamariki? And we've been doing some really amazing work with Jules at Work and Income to explore how work and income might support a shift towards aspirations and supporting parents with very young tamariki who would otherwise kind of disappear off their system at that time. And the other one I wanted to just touch on was some of the most powerful supports come from other whānau, and this is a critical mechanism for us to explore in terms of how do we actually invest into regrowing that village around a child. Very easy for us to invest into programs and services, and this stuff, I think we've got some really good clues about what does it take to create more connections between people and community and those safe spaces to be able to connect and have your voices heard. I've talked a little bit about te toku toru, but we really want to think about what does this look like applied in community in terms of what we might do differently. How do we recalibrate? And as Jules talked about, the authorising environment to be able to do that is really crucial. We want to think about it at every level. And I've talked a little bit about this idea of a wellbeing system in place and how we start to build out from the context of where people live their lives and ground it in community, because that's the only way to make it make sense. So just really briefly, because I think I might have gone over, we've been grappling with what are those critical kind of ingredients for an infrastructure and operating model for a wellbeing in place kind of approach. And there are 5 things that we think we need to really lean into. One of them is that community level platform. How are we resourcing communities to actually grapple with what strengthening, healing and responding can look like for them? What is that backbone function that can support that transition to a new business as usual? And how do we activate leadership and governance at every level and reimagine that actually? So we talk about collapsing the distance between the whānau who have been most poorly served by our systems and the people who are making decisions about that. So we think we can do some interesting stuff there. We've talked about the responsive kind of national system stewardship, and I think critically to that is the two-way accountability actually. And finally, and I will tukia te rako kia, Dee Ann, the learning system that underpins this. So we have to learn into transformation. It's not going to be something we'll do overnight. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Aimee. Nā te roro, nā taku roro, ka oro ai te iwi. With your knowledge and our knowledge, our people will thrive. And that's the important part that we ask that you take away today. It's not about just one side of the coin, and we have to have 2 sides of the coins to make it happen. And at Ete Minister, we've got thousands of years of knowledge sitting in amongst us that will help enable Te Aorerekura. And I know there is many that sit here in the Zoom and the Zui, as our Ngāti Hine people call it, that will tautoko the mahi of Te Aorerekura. Tēnā rā koutou katoa.
Ka nui te mihi kia koutou Dee Ann, ko Anne, ko Jules, ko Aimee, tēnā koutou katoa, e ngā Aorerekura. Thank you so much for sharing with us today some insight into the incredible mahi that you are doing on the ground in South Auckland towards strength-based wellbeing. E te iwi, if you have any ideas or feedback, you are welcome to email us on contact@tepunaaonui.govt.nz and we will pass it on. I'm now going to hand over to Debbie and Chris to close this session with their insights on what they heard.
Chris, do you want to go first or would you like me to go first?
Either way, it's easy for me, Debbie.
Okay, all right, kia ora koutou, I'll kick off. Just like to acknowledge Minister Davidson. Kia ora, Minister, nice to see you again, and Jules, Aimee and Dee Ann, nice to see you guys as well, even if it is over Zui, and thank you for your contribution this morning. I do really want to acknowledge both the work that you do in delivery of services that you provide, but also the work that you do to try and advocate for doing better. And I guess if I think about what I heard this morning, Dee Ann, I think, you know, the listen more resonated really strongly with me in terms of, you know, if I'm thinking about it from a Wellington perspective, I really took that away. But overall, I think what we all violently agree with is, you know, the way in which we think about delivering of services, it should be locally led from the community level. It should be locally led by people who understand the context in which they are delivering services, so their own communities. I think there's a sense, and I got the sense, particularly Aimee, and some of the stuff that you were talking about, you know, change takes time. So we need sort of a longer term investment horizon for some of the things that we are thinking about, both in terms of infrastructure at the kind of community level, but also the types of funding for services. And you all talked about relationships in one form or another, and I totally agree. Relationships matter big time. And I think I think, and you talked about trust and the building of trust. You're so right, because I think when you have trust and you are at a, then trust means that you can take more risks and you also get more innovation from my perspective. So I think that really resonated with me. I think we sometimes lose sight of the fact that we need to organise our services around the way people live their lives, not for the administrative pleasure of agencies. And, you know, we can't ever lose sight of that. And that today just reinforced that for me. And I also picked up on the comment that COVID has enabled us to do things differently because we had to. And there's some really valuable lessons that we have all learnt and experienced as a result of that. And we need to hold on to those and embed them in the way that we want to do things in the future, whether that's flexibility, speed of decision making, whatever it is. I think that's a fair observation. But there are some opportunities, and ICR is one, the social sector commissioning work that is underway is another. I think powering up the regions and continuing to do that, both in terms of flexibility of decision making and connection to communities, is really important. And as Dee Ann said at the end, you know, we all bring strengths and perspectives. It's how we put them together for the benefit of whānau and communities. So I'll stop there. Thank you very much. Kia ora.
Kia ora, thanks, Debbie. Ko Crystal ana toko ingoa. I am the Acting Deputy Commissioner for Iwi and Community at present. Kia ora, Minister, and to all of you attending. And thank you so much to the presenters today. It was just marvellous to hear everything happening in your spaces at the moment. And it's also a real pleasure to hear in particular what's happening in Counties Manukau. Most of my first 20 years was spent there in frontline and leadership roles, and you know, the work that's happened to pull together agencies to benefit communities over the years just been fantastic. So it's a really fantastic update in that space. Thank you. Similar to Debbie, the sorts of things that I guess resonated from me listening to you speak, especially around strength-based wellbeing. First, Dee Ann, was certainly that listening and learning from each other. One of the very historic principles of policing is the public are the police and the police are the public. And our approach in New Zealand, Aotearoa, has always been around that community policing style in terms of listening to people and not dictating solutions to problems as we see them, but actually understanding what's happening in our communities and unlocking and enabling the potential for change. So awesome to hear that. And also listening to the voices of tamariki is so important. The portfolios that my team work with around family harm, youth, mental health, diversity, no matter what the community group or the kaupapa that we're listening and talking to, we always hear about the importance of the voice of tamariki, not only in terms of what they see and hear and the change they expect, but also enabling them as future leaders of our communities. So they need to be really well placed to be able to do that. Dee Ann touched on MDCAT, as also Jules and Ann did, which I'll speak to very shortly as well. Also appreciate Aimee speaking to the intention to activate locally led solutions, and those leaders there too, super important as we move into the tokotoro model and really starting to integrate what we mean in terms of prevention, response and healing. Police have been you know, quite focused in one part of that the model for quite some time now, and have always been quite open to reaching out to broadening into the prevention and healing space. And so it's a really a thing of beauty to hear with a movement in that direction. Kia ora, Jules, great to see you again. And also appreciated your mention of the community-led element of caring for communities, and the to us is probably the most important part of that, but also that regionally enabled part with the regional public sector leaders groups as well, as a great way to unlock potential in our communities. And great to see you again as well, and also reflecting the test and learn kaupapa that you mentioned, just having that courage and bravery to try things differently, or else we'll be just expecting those same results again, which is absolutely not where we want to be. The collaboration is absolutely key, which leads me back to MDCAT and those regional leaders groups. As a coincidence, we've got all of our police leaders from across the country here today, currently meeting across the road. I've just come back from it, and two of the MDCAT and the regional public sector leaders forums have both been mentioned this morning already in the context of some wider issues happening in our community, playing out around youth, ram raids, all of those sorts of things. But certainly as really capable forums to draw in community-led solutions around family harm, health, and all of those things that are impacting. So just totally endorse that approach, and the Counties Manukau MDCAT was given a great endorsement in those commentaries with our police leaders this morning. And I think finally, again, as Anne talked on that trust is absolutely vital, as Anne has said too, the trust between the agencies and the NGOs for the benefit of our communities. I think the final thing I'm left with, and really comes from, I think sums up everything everyone has said today, but also our experiences with our communities as strength. The strength-based wellbeing strength is really the heart and passion of our people in our communities leading change, and also in particular iwi as well. So I'm really excited to hear about what's happening across the motu, and I thank you so much for the opportunity today to listen and again learn ourselves. So kia ora koutou katoa.
Tēnā, Chris, kōrua ko Debbie. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, for taking time away from your wonderful mahi that you do, and for sharing some invaluable insights with us. E te iwi, we now have a short break for reflection and comfort. We encourage you to move away from your screen during this time and enjoy yourself in the process. And we will be back online at 11:40 a.m. to explore Shift 2 towards mobilising communities. Hei a nei.